Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and murderous cannibals hoping to chop you up. I'm Noah Hook, and today we are finally looking at my favorite film of all time, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This 1974 independent horror film follows a pair of siblings and their young hippie friends as they set out to investigate the desecration of their grandfather's grave in rural Texas. Their idyllic road trip turns into a nightmare when they encounter a group of depraved, murderous outcasts living next to their family's farmhouse. As the group is attacked one by the skin-wearing, chainsaw-wielding Leatherface, the survivors must do everything they can to escape with their lives and limbs intact. I am so excited to finally talk about this fantastic film and the very mixed bag of a franchise that follows this. There are currently 9 TCM films in total, ranging from terrifying art house masterpieces, B-movie horror comedies, brutal remakes and reboots, and absolute pieces of dog shit. It is one of the most misused and mismanaged franchises of all time, and it's got some really high highs and some really low lows. But today we're looking at the film that started it all and immediately cemented Leatherface and his terrifying family in the cultural zeitgeist. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was of course directed by the legendary Tobe Hooper, one of the most influential and wide-ranging horror directors of all time. Just a few of his classics include Poltergeist, The Funhouse, Life Force, Eaten Alive, Salem's Lot, Invaders from Mars, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but it's this film that he's arguably most remembered for. Hooper had begun developing the themes and stories while he was working at UT Austin as a cameraman. It was here he met Kim Henkel, who would co-write Hooper's debut film Eggshells, as well as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Eaten Alive. He also wrote and directed TCM The Next Generation, but we won't judge him for that quite yet. In preparation for the film, Henkel and Hooper researched the horrifying real-life murders committed by Ed Gein, Elmer Wayne Henley, Dean Arnold Correll, and the Manson family cult. As many of you know, the 60s and 70s marked a severe uptick in documented serial killers, and at the time Americans at large didn't know what to make of this seemingly senseless violence. They also took inspiration from the increasing cultural tensions within American politics surrounding counterculture, drug use, radicalized fascism and communism, and general uncertainty about the country's future as the quote-unquote American dream seemed to be rotting away. They've also noted the misinformation and brutal violence being televised around Watergate, the 1973 oil crisis, and of course the Vietnam War. That's actually how they came up with the often mimicked based on true events intro. Hooper and Henkel were able to raise up to $140,000, but even in 1974, that was a really minuscule budget. From all accounts, it was a pretty rough production, but more on that in a sec. The cast consists of a bunch of actors who were largely unknown at the time, with the protagonists consisting of Marilyn Burns from Eaten Alive and Future Kill as Sally Hardesty, Paul Partain from Race with the Devil as Franklin Hardesty, Alan Danziger from Eggshells as Jerry, William Bale from Mausoleum as Kirk, and Terry McMinn from Butcher Boys as Pam. The film's quartet of iconic villains includes Gunnar Hansen from Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers and Mosquito as Leatherface, Edwin Neal from JFK as the Hitchhiker, Jim Sedow from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 as the Cook, and John Dugan from Rock Paper Scissors as Grandpa. Cinematography was handled by Daniel Pearl, who'd go on to shoot the 2003 Texas Chainsaw remake, the 2009 Friday the 13th remake, and AVP Requiem. I think I mentioned it in my Friday the 13th review, but that is just such a crazy range in camera quality from this to AVP Requiem. The score and sound design was collaborated on by Hooper and composer Wayne Bell, who's worked on films like Boyhood and A Scanner Darkly. They almost entirely avoided using music in the film, opting to utilize bells, saws, animal noises, industrial noise, and the intentional misuses of various instruments to add to the tense atmosphere. The film was primarily shot in a Texas farmhouse in the middle of summer, with most shooting days being above 100 degrees. The house was not cooled and there was very little ventilation. The crew covered its walls and floors with animal blood obtained at a local slaughterhouse, and in some cases, real blood was used for scenes. Art director Robert Burns drove around the countryside and collected the remains of cattle and other animals in various stages of decomposition, which he then littered the floors of the house with. So yeah, as you can imagine, the place smelled pretty fucking rank. There were also a ton of very questionable safety decisions, like Burns cutting his own finger with a razor to feed Grandpa, and Gunnar Hansen running a real chainsaw inches from William Vale's face. Just about everybody had some kind of injury by the end of shooting. By all accounts, it was basically a production hell, and everybody hated Hooper by the end of it. I can't condone an unsafe set and shitty conditions, but I'll be damned if the intense heat, rotting carcasses, abandoned properties, and real weapons don't add a genuine feel of authenticity. TCM ultimately grossed $30 million at the box office, becoming the 12th highest grossing film of 1974. It was met with quite a bit of controversy upon its release, which was partially on purpose and part of the marketing strategy, but it was banned in Britain until 1998.
What happened was true. The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America. This is the movie that is just as real, just as terrifying as being there.
It was banned for shorter periods in many other countries, including Brazil, Chile, Finland, France, Iceland, Ireland, Norway, Singapore, Sweden, and West Germany. It was met with mixed reviews from critics, with some finding the film too despicable to find value in. But as more time passed, more critics began to realize that it's not the lowbrow hack-and-slash bloodbath its persona would have you believe, and that it's much more of an atmospheric, artistic assault on the senses. It has slowly risen up to the highest rank of horror films, often considered one of the greatest of all time. It has had a humongous influence on the genre and culture at large. It currently has an 89 and 82% on Rotten Tomatoes, along with a 3.8 on Letterboxd, which is too low in my opinion, but I get it. In many respects, TCM is not a fun movie. It can be downright unpleasant. But as I said at the start, I love this film a lot more than the average person, and I hope y'all are ready to watch me gush about it for like 30 minutes. If not, you should probably get out of here, but with all of that said, it's probably time we get started. We better go wake up Grandpa, cause we're watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The movie opens with a slow text crawl that explains that what we're about to witness is the tragedy that befell a group of siblings and their friends.
For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare.
This badass intro was voiced by prolific actor John Larroquette, who was reportedly paid in weed. Hell yeah. The events of this fateful day led to the discovery of a bizarre series of macabre crimes, which were aptly named
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
In the darkness, we hear the sound of someone digging up and prying open a grave, and the stinging faux sound of a flashbulb camera gives us snapshots of the dug up corpses. Don't worry folks, I know y'all really wanted to see these bodies up close in the daylight, didn't you?
Grave robbing in Texas is this hour's top news story. An informant led officers of the Muerto County Sheriff's Department to a cemetery just outside the small rural Texas community of Newt early this morning.
We learn over a radio that the small Texas town of Newt has been hit with a string of grave robberies and desecrations. The local sheriff seems to think some international jewel thieves are responsible, but I think we all know that's not the case. Some bodies have been stolen and others have been used for disgusting art projects like this. The families of locals have been heading to the area to check on the graves of their loved ones. This takes us to the opening credits, which gives us a taste of this film's intense score and sound design.
Oil storage units continue to burn out of control at the huge Texaco refinery near the Texas-Louisiana border.
Over this sound, we listen to more radio audio describing a wide range of crimes, diseases, and political unrest, providing an effective background of unease and doom. Now it's time to meet our unlucky protagonists. The group consists of 5 young adults. We've got astrology lover Pam.
Saturn's a bad influence. It's just particularly a bad influence now because it's in retrograde.
Her boyfriend Kirk, and disco-loving fella Jerry. We've also got sister and brother Sally and Franklin Hardesty, whose grandfather was buried in one of the desecrated graveyards. They're all on a road trip together, but are taking this detour to check on their grandfather's grave. Sally's pretty chill, but Franklin is pretty tedious.
This heat is just driving me crazy. I don't know if I can take much more.
And it's not because he's in a wheelchair, has to piss in cans by the side of the road, and gets blown down hills by passing trucks. It's actually everything else about him. The group arrives at Granddad's cemetery, and Sally checks on him, while poor fucking Franklin is captive audience to a local drunk.
I see things.
Fun fact, I'm also a painter, and a few years ago I made this weird ass painting of a bunch of classic harbingers from horror films. It's got Judd, Crazy Ralph, Banjo Boy, and this guy. Grandpa seems untouched, so the group starts heading towards the old farmhouse Sally and Franklin visited as kids. They also pass by Grandpa's old slaughterhouse, and Franklin prattles on about the classic ways you can kill a cow. Now the cattle industry uses a bolt gun to stun the animals before slaughter. The group spots a hitchhiker and makes the single biggest mistake of their lives by giving him a lift. He was apparently hanging out at the slaughterhouse and says his family has always worked in meat. He and Franklin discuss why the sledgehammer is a better way to kill cattle, and he shows off his photography collection. The hitchhiker also yaps about sweet, delicious head cheese, which Hooper was using as a working title for the film. Then he snatches Franklin's knife and slices his palm open before sharing that he has one of his own. He also invites them over for a family dinner, but Kirk politely declines. He tries to charge Franklin for an unwanted photo.
$2. It's a good picture.
And when the group refuses, he burns it up with some gunpowder. That's the final straw, and the group pulls over to kick him out, but the hitchhiker slices Franklin's arm open before he's sent packing. They pull up to a gas station, which is of course out of gas until tomorrow. The owner tells them how to get to their granddad's place, but warns that they should be real careful traipsing around out there.
You boys don't want to go mess around the old house?
Jerry picks up some delicious barbecue, Franklin admires the hitchhiker's tenacity to harm himself, and Sally notices a big old blood stain the freak left on the van. I wonder what it means. The group ignores the cook's warning and heads to their grandpa's place, although Franklin is stuck outside while the others wander through the daddy longlegs infested home. He listens as the group has a great time without him, expressing his anger in a new way he picked up from the hitchhiker.
Come on, Franklin. It's gonna be a fun trip.
He also finds some very interesting craft projects. Pam and Kirk head out to a nearby swimming hole, only to find that it's bone dry now. They do, however, notice a home running on a generator, and Kirk hopes he can barter for some gasoline. They pass by a classic car graveyard, and Kirk's unable to get an answer at the door. He does find a very human-looking tooth, though. He peeks inside the home and calls out, and a squealing pig seemingly calls out from this scary taxidermy room. Oh yeah, good idea, Kirk. Better check it out. Leatherface gives Kirk a second bonk to finish the job and takes him away. Pam breaks and enters shortly after looking for Kirk, but she gets a bit further inside. She trips into a very bony, very feathery room which features some real artisan furniture. Chicken bones, cow bones, deer bones, people bones, we got it all down here at Mr. Chicken's Bone Emporium. Pam tries to get the fuck out of there, only for Leatherface to pop out of his room and snatch her. He carries her into his makeshift slaughterhouse and yeets her onto a meat hook. The poor girl is forced to watch as Leatherface starts hacking up Kirk with a, you guessed it, chainsaw. Jerry gets tired of listening to the Hardesty siblings squabble and heads out to find Pam and Kirk, which allows the two to have a heart-to-heart. Franklin knows she didn't want him to come on this road trip, but Sally says she's just tired and frustrated due to everything that's been going on today. Maybe it's all because Saturn's in retrograde. Our Paisley-loving king makes it to the murder house as the sun begins to set, and goddamn, these hippies do not understand the concept of private property. Oh, looks like Pam has been taken off the hook. I wonder where she could be. God damn it, where do these fucking hippies keep coming from? I'm running out of freezer space. That's it, no more waiting, it's time to go on the offense. Night falls and Sally refuses to leave without the man formerly known as Jerry. They were dating, I think I forgot to mention it, it's not really important. Franklin thinks it's about time they get the hell out of there, and for once I agree with him. He realizes that Jerry has the keys and starts freaking out, and reluctantly decides he'd rather search with her than be left alone. The two go hollering through the holler, and they begin to hear a rumbling sound getting closer.
Stop!
Sally watches her brother get hacked up before sprinting away, and she runs through the woods towards what I'm sure is a very trustworthy house. She makes it inside and locks the door, running upstairs as Leatherface starts cutting down the door. She finds a seemingly dead old man in a rocking chair, along with a definitely dead old woman. Fuck, I love this sound design. Leatherface gets inside as she's trying to run back downstairs, and he chases her back up and out of a second-story window. Leatherface proceeds to chase her through a second round of woodland mayhem, and it goes on for a while. Sally makes it all the way back to the gas station and bursts inside, and the confused owner tries to make sense of her delirious ramblings. He doesn't have a phone here, but wants to take her to the nearest one he knows of, and Sally observes some tasty meat while the cook starts his truck. But then he comes back with a burlap sack and some rope. Womp womp. She grabs a knife, but the cook quickly swats it away, and he starts whacking her with a broom. He knocks her out, ties her up, gags her, and plops her in the truck for a little joyride.
I hope you're not too uncomfortable down there.
A long time no see, hitchhiker. The cook hops out and starts whacking his little brother, scolding him for nearly getting caught for his recent grave robbings.
I thought you was in a hurry.
That's right, baby. The cook, the hitchhiker, and Leatherface are family, and Sally's joining them for dinner.
Look what your brother did to that store.
God, that is such a funny line. The cook beats up Leatherface for fucking up the door, and it seems the skin-wearing killer has switched over to a submissive feminine persona and costume. Leatherface confirms that the other kids are dead, and the hitchhiker heads upstairs to get Grandpa. He and Leatherface carry their glorious patriarch downstairs, and Sally looks around at her fucked up situation. They sit Grandpa down next to Sally and cut open her finger, which is actually art director Robert Burns' real finger actually being cut, and the geezer gives it a little sucky suck. Ooh, Grandpa likey. Sally wakes up screaming at the dinner table, and the boys are sure to match her energy. Oh, I love the face lamp. Look at that thing. She begs the cook to make them stop, but the hitchhiker dismisses him as just the cook.
You can make him stop. No shit.
He says he and Leatherface do all the real work, and the two argue over who pulls their weight around here. The cook supposedly don't take no pleasure in killing, but he says certain things gotta be done whether you like it or not. He does get a kick out of watching Sally suffer though. She goes into a full-on panic attack and screams her fucking head off, and the camera gets all up in them eyeballs. The cook tells them to hurry up and kill her, but the hitchhiker wants to let Grandpa have some fun.
You always said he's the best. He's the best, all right. Oh, Grandpa's the best killer there ever was.
They set Grandpa up with a bucket and sledgehammer, and the cook brags that he once killed 60 cows in 5 minutes. Fortunately, Grandpa is pretty far past his prime though, and the decrepit old man can't even hold the hammer on his own. He starts to bonk Sally with the assistance of his grandchildren, but they aren't quite killing blows. Hitchhiker grows impatient and tries to grab the hammer himself, which allows Sally to flee straight out another window. Damn, it's morning now, and the boys quickly come running after her. The hitchhiker catches up to her at the main road, and he starts slashing her back with his knife. But this bright new day must have a more positive horoscope, because a Deus Ex Mac Truckina comes around the bend and fucking flattens the little creep. The truck driver hops out and tries to help Sally, actually yeeting a wrench into Leatherface's face. The big lug accidentally cuts himself with the saw but keeps charging forward, but then a random ass pickup truck shows up. This poor fella is left to fend for himself, but Sally's able to jump into the bed. And just as abruptly as it started, Sally has finally escaped her nightmare. Take us on home, Leatherface! And that's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Whoo boy, do I love this film, and I swear I find something new to love about it every time I watch it. There are very few films that I would say have a truly unique tone and atmosphere, but I truly believe that TCM lives in a world of its own. There are plenty of really great 70s films that either have the gritty, really graphic violence or the really artsy cinematic style, but very few films push both of those elements so far. Every single shot in this film is so purposeful and beautiful, even if it's a fucked up bone sculpture kind of beautiful. This film feels sweaty, dusty, and filthy. You feel like you're there under the beaming Texas sun and trapped inside this disgusting corpse-filled farmhouse. And the sound design is equally as unique and disturbing, and it's gone on to be so influential on a ton of other really great horror films. Leatherface and his deranged family make such great antagonists, and their respective actions and dynamics are packed with so much meaning. This whole film is one big critique of American government, capitalism, and traditional values. So if you're one of those wham I hate woke movies, these goddamn liberals are ruining horror type people, I got bad news for ya. Okay, so it's not that straightforwardly obvious with its political affiliations, but this film really does have a lot to say. It's a rumination on the corroding, crumbling, rotting, dug up corpse of the American dream. I had mentioned the range of national unrest and distrust earlier, but one of the biggest elements that defined the 70s was the huge coverage of these kinds of subjects on the TV. By 1960, 90% of Americans had televisions and began getting nightly broadcasts of local, national, and international news, and it was at this time young people in the country got nightly updates on American activities that they believed in or fought against. Political protests against American participation in the Cold War and eventually the Vietnam War became almost as documented as the wars themselves. Hippies, flower children, and idealists, a lot like our protagonists, who were both apolitical and radically political, tried to break away from and advocate against the American war machine and set out on their own paths. There is a constant theme of old versus new, human versus automation, and child versus parent. Through the town of Newt, we see a community destroyed by industrialization and automation, as the locals seem to have nothing better to do than sit around and wait for an outsider to come across them. The workers at the slaughterhouse have been replaced by machines, the sledgehammer has been replaced by the bolt gun. Idle hands are the devil's playthings, and the cook, the hitchhiker, and Leatherface fell even deeper into their own depravity as the world around them collapsed. I mean, with nothing new to see or do, what else are you gonna do besides dig up skeletons? The Sawyers exist in a primitive, archaic nightmare rooted in their supposedly glorious past. That's why they just about worship Grandpa, the half-dead patriarch who is the ultimate symbol of everything that is opposite to the young, hopeful hippies they are brutalizing. The violence of the old world may have a new look, but it has been passed down nonetheless. Whether it's a hammer or a bolt gun, the cattle still get slaughtered. Through the Sawyers, we also witness the bastardization of the American nuclear family, especially under the lens of what happens when a bunch of barbaric men are in control. The cook, despite being a brother as well, has taken on the role of father to the other two. The hitchhiker is like the rebellious son, and Leatherface is forced into the stereotypical role of woman. This is why he changes into the face, outfit, and demeanor of a woman by nightfall when he knows the abusive cook is returning home. Leatherface likely has some kind of mental disability based on his inability to speak beyond grunts, and his abusive brothers have essentially trained him to be an attack dog who protects the property while they're away. He is arguably a victim in all of this too, and he truly seems terrified after killing Kirk, Pam, and Jerry. The film is also one of the most convincing arguments for vegetarianism I've ever seen. There are only a couple shots of real cows, but they depict them in such a depressing, doomed way that it hits really hard. And that same sense of doom is projected onto the hippies as they wander further into the proverbial slaughterhouse. They have left behind the logical, ethical world they know, finding themselves in a world where their lives are worth nothing beyond the meat on their bones. Well, their bones will probably get used for something too, to be fair. Another unique aspect of the film that I don't see discussed as often is the emphasis on astrology. Pam's readings help expand the radio's discussion of national unrest into a cosmic affair, as though there is no way to stop what's coming. There are tons of shots of both the sun and moon, which are both prominent elements of astrological signs and readings. The opening credits have always reminded me of solar flares, and the close-ups of Sally's eyeball imitate that same celestial look at a minuscule level. It's as though the peril Pam warned about had seeped into every fiber of her being. There are also some really cool imitations of the sun and moon throughout, like the sunflowers and the great face lamp. I've always found it noteworthy that there's no mention of Christianity in this film at all. It seems God left the Sawyers long ago. And I haven't even mentioned how funny the film is at times. Hooper has a great sense of irony and black comedy, and there's little moments of that throughout that help bring some levity to it to keep the film from being a total downer. The hippies are visiting their dead grandpa, while the Sawyers basically worship their old man who won't fucking die. The supposedly kind hippies kind of treat Franklin like shit and constantly leave him out, while the Sawyers carefully carry their wheelchair-using family member downstairs so he can join the festivities. We may prattle on about peace, but we shouldn't throw stones at farmhouses when we live in glass ones. For me, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the ultimate horror film. It is an unwavering, unbending vision. It does not care if you like it or not. It wants to chew you up and spit you out. It wants to boil your head until your brains leak out so it can slurp up your head cheese. It's a 90-minute window into a straight-up American Gothic nightmare filled with nothing but agony and depravity. Every single actor fills their role perfectly, and Marilyn Burns in particular steals the show in that third act. It features some incredible cinematography, sound design, editing, and set design. It is an unpleasant, sadistic, cruel film that pulls zero punches while also being really minimal with the guts and gore. It lets our imaginations do the heavy lifting, which is always the scariest kind of horror to bring to us. And despite Sally's survival, it denies us any happy endings or catharsis. It's a meat grinder that will keep on grinding if you escape it, as there will always be more hapless youth who will fall into it. I understand it isn't a film that everyone's gonna love, but it holds a very special place in my heart. And if you somehow haven't seen it before, I implore you to go watch it as soon as possible. Well, that's about it. Thank you so much for listening to me gush about my favorite movie for 30 minutes. I genuinely appreciate it. But what do y'all think about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Do you enjoy it as much as me? If not, let me know why down below. Ooh, while you're at it, share your favorite horror movie with me down below as well. If I had to go with a top 5 right now, I'd say Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Thing. Those have been kind of my number 1 and 2 for years now. Then, I don't know if I had to throw a couple more in there, maybe Possession, Pumpkinhead, and fuck it, we'll throw From Beyond in there as well. Soon we'll be checking out Hooper's very humorous sequel to this, but first join me in 2 weeks as we check out a mystery patron request. Thank you all so much for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews. And if you want to help support the channel further, you should go check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks, y'all.